fires. But when we're talking about wildfire, I have now hundreds of homes that are threatened by fire, many of which are igniting. And if there's nobody there to put out those fires, then it will result in total home loss. So.
Okay, welcome to the Colorado High Country Real Estate Podcast, where we talk all things real estate. And I'm your host, Dave Metzler. If you don't know me, I'm an entrepreneur, local business owner. I own two companies, Tiger Home Inspections and Tiger Radon Mitigation. And this is the Colorado High Country Podcast. I've got an awesome special guest lined up for you today in studio. Eric Lovgren from Eagle County. He's a wildfire specialist, and we're going to talk to him in just a second. Well, let's go ahead and get this thing started.
Rocky Mountain High, Colorado. Rocky Mountain High, Colorado.
Okay, all right, let's go ahead and bring Eric in. Let's do it right now. Okay, I've got Eric Lovgren with me today.
Hey, Dave.
Hey, Eric. Hey, so Eric is with Eagle County and in the wildfire prevention department. I don't know what department you're in. Tell us what department you're in and what you do.
Yes, I'm the community mitigation manager for the Office of Wildfire Mitigation and Protection, which is part of our emergency management department at Eagle County.
Okay. So kind of specifically, what are your main duties?
Well, we're largely charged with sort of preparing for the community as well as the landscape for the inevitable return of wildfire. So that is done largely through land use and building codes that we are responsible for maintaining and implementing, so that we're making sure that new development is at least has some sort of mitigation actions tied to it around wildfire. We also manage the Real Fire program, which is our voluntary home assessment and mitigation program, and we offer cost share assistance through that to help people implement these actions around their home and property. I also serve in a leadership capacity with the Roaring Fork and Eagle County Wildfire Collaboratives, as well as the statewide network of practitioners known as Fire Adapted Colorado.
Wow. I have no idea what any of that means.
I didn't even use an acronym. Wait till I start throwing some acronyms out. And you're free to throw the acronym flag whenever I say something, like WUI, for example, the most enduring acronym in my field, which is the Wildland Urban Interface.
Oh, wow.
Or where, vegetation interacts with homes. And for people like me, where vegetative fuels and built fuel interact and create problems related to disasters in our community and loss of property and potentially life.
Wow. So let's kind of set this thing up a little bit. So we're here in Colorado, and obviously a lot of forests. We have a lot of dead beetle kill trees, and obviously we've had a lot of drought over the last several years. And so with all that stuff in mind, what is it that people, homeowners maybe especially, what is it that really they should be aware of?
Sure. Homeowners should be aware of the fact that, and that's why I queued up that term, wildland urban interface, is that they don't need to live in a heavily wooded area or a long distance out of town or someplace that we kind of historically associate with being at risk from wildfire loss. I mean, that the term wildland urban interface is something that people in my field debate often. Is it everywhere in the state of Colorado, as evident by fires like the Marshall Fire, which happened in what people would largely call a Front Range sort of suburban neighborhood,
right?
Or in Lahaina in Maui, where we saw this equal level of destruction. So what we mostly try to keep people aware of is that a fire disaster like that could happen anywhere where conditions exist that lend themselves to vegetation igniting built fuels, or growing fuels and built fuels interacting is the simplest way to put it. So recognizing that your home and property may lend themselves to ignition during a wildfire is step one, and then we can talk about all the different actions people can take to mitigate that threat.
Okay, so would you say that that's kind of your main department, or your main focus is protecting property and life from wildfires, and this idea of defensible space around your property? Is that kind of your main focus, or do you guys also deal with actual forest fires and things like that? Do you know what I'm saying? Or is your focus kind of more towards the homeowner?
No, exactly. Our focus is centered around three tenets of the National Cohesive Strategy for Fire Management, which is to facilitate a safe and effective response, create fire resilient landscapes, and build fire adaptive communities. So what we're talking about right now is kind of in the sphere of fire adaptive communities, where we're preparing people, places, and property for the return of fire.
Okay.
So when we look at that, those are efforts aimed at, you don't know what you don't know. So making sure that people understand what the risk is specific to their property, and that those mitigation actions that they implement at a small scale, a parcel level around their home, do yield results. What's different about wildfire, say from a hurricane or a flood that might engulf everything in its path, is that fire moves along the path of available fuels according to the laws of combustion.
Okay.
So we can manage fuels, whether it's our landscaping, or the forest we live in, or the home that we put in that area, to withstand the impacts of wildfire better than, say, moving the water or taking a Category 5 storm off of that's engulfing an entire state. On a scale of tens of feet, we can impact fire behavior. So if we are modifying just stuff within 5 feet of your exterior walls and decks, we can make a big difference. If we're looking at what type of screening you have on vents to your house, that might be the difference. So it's little actions that amount to be big change.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm in the home inspection world, and one of the things we're looking for, obviously, are fire hazards. We're looking at dryer vents, making sure they're not clogged up with lint, which obviously everyone knows can start a fire. I have some videos here I want to show you real quick. I want to show you this video here. I want to get your take on it. Okay. So what did you make of that quick video? It was a video kind of showing defensible space. Well, first of all, let's define defensible space.
Yeah, and that's sort of a term that some people don't appreciate because it implies a defensive action being taken. Survivable space is another term that maybe people could use, but we stick with defensible space because it's a term people know, right?
Okay.
So a defensible or survivable space around your home is an area where we've modified vegetation, both at different levels, to sort of look at its density relative to your home as well as to itself. And we've often do that by looking at what is the spacing of trees and shrubs starting at the exterior wall or deck or attachment, and moving out. In the video they showed 0 to 5 feet, 5 to 30 feet, and then beyond, which are the typical zones, one or zone 1A, 1 and 2. There's lots of different things. Those are the typical zones of defensible space. And we know from a lot of science that's been done and a lot of post-fire investigations that what's happening within the first 5 feet of the combustible elements of your home makes a big difference. So if that area is full of woody shrubs or heavy mulches or tall grasses or wood piles or anything, or juniper shrubs or things that are readily ignitable by flying embers or small surface fire moving through the grasses or things next door, and there's nobody there to put out the fire, which is often the case. I think we pay for a certain level of fire protection in most communities in the U.S. centered around, I have one fire in one structure that needs to be put out, and we send a bunch of people and fire engines, and we're pretty good at putting out those kind of fires. But when we're talking about wildfire, I have now hundreds of homes that are threatened by fire, many of which are igniting, and if there's nobody there to put out those fires, then it will result in total home loss. So that's a ground 0 to 5 feet. And that video kind of touched on it, but it didn't really explain the why. And then it went out to the 5 to 30 feet where we would thin and remove, and we want to think about now not just, is this thing burning going to be in direct flame contact with the combustible elements of my house, but what kind of heat forces are it putting out? A lot of time, is it going to create enough heat and more embers that can ignite elements of my home, which is where I felt like the video fell short. So defensible space is important, but we lose the majority of structures in wildfires to flying embers.
Oh, wow.
So that's where we want to talk about hardening the home from embers, and that's what we spend a lot of time on when we're doing home assessments through the Real Fire program, is like what you said, What kind of screening do you have on your vent? Is it clogged with lint? What kind of vent is it? Is it something that's pulling into your HVAC, or is it something that's drawing into your attic space?
Right.
What do your gutters look like? What kind of roof do you have? What is that near wall environment, that first 5 feet? Is it all heavy bark mulch and juniper, or is it, maybe gravel and stone and perennial flowers and stuff that is much less likely to ignite and bring fire to the structure?
Right. So that kind of brings me to another quick video I have. Let's watch this real quick.
Are heading towards the power pole. Yep, but I'm here catching right now. They're going to attempt to go direct on the fire. Trying to line up a replacement engine.
Defending defensible space, pouring water on a wood shake roof. All right. So many things about that video. That I at least heard radios going off, which maybe tells me that those were firefighters, not homeowners. They could have been scanning, though, too. A question: when I see somebody with an active wildfire approaching them, frantically taking a garden hose to spray down their wooden roof, I feel like if that's not a firefighter, so many conversations were missed before we got there. For one, that's the last thing we want you to do. Defensible space does not mean please stay and defend your home. When I say there's not enough firefighters and fire engines to go around, that's an accurate statement. And I don't want to be disingenuous by saying there will be a fire engine in everybody's driveway. Don't worry about it. We got this. That's absolutely not the case. In fact, that's the reason why we do implement wildfire mitigation. What I'm saying is that we can do a lot to prepare your home and property for that fire so that firefighters can do, more with less, or the home can defend itself. The last thing I want anybody doing is thinking that they're going to stay and defend their home. And on every single wildfire, this happens. And then, frankly, the thing that people forget about is smoke. Mm-hmm. And if you've ever been too close to a campfire, you know how mildly annoying that can be. If you've ever been staring down a wall of smoke that's turning the sky dark in the middle of the day and is full of toxic materials from homes burning, that is a terrifying thing, and it's incompatible with survival, frankly, for human beings, not to mention the heat forces that come with wildfires that will cause third-degree burns on you and I in seconds. But a wood wall can withstand minutes and minutes of half hour or more of exposure to heat, that we can't. So we flip the risk to you and I from a fire. It's heat and flames and smoke, and we recognize that. We're people. We know, right. We're millions or thousands of years of evolutionary forces that have ingrained in us that fire bad. But that's not necessarily what's going to burn down your home. It will, and that's why we will focus on that defensible space, that separation of the big flames and the heat forces that might come off of burning trees and shrubs near your house. But then we harden the home from embers because, again, there's no forest outside of Louisville or Superior in Colorado. What there is there's a high step grassland that's prone to very intense wind forces. Yep. And in an era of climate change, that's only getting worse and worse. So we have tight built fuels, lots of homes, fences, decks, landscaping, and stuff like that's been added in an area that's prone to severe weather and high winds in particular, and drought, like you mentioned, or things like forest insects and other diseases. Then the situation is right for that wildland urban interface, that WUI disaster. If we can sever that chain of events at the beginning, and we have homes and communities that have adapted to that fire, they've recognized that risk, they've removed some of those combustible elements from the exterior of their home and landscaping, then we've got a real chance, because we don't have the fire suppression abilities, and nor have we ever, to be able to do much about urban conflagrations. So that's what we're really worried about. We can talk about home loss and do a lot of meaningful mitigation strategies on a parcel level, but when we look at issues around insurability of homes and communities, access, impacts to the environment and to the economy, that's what we're really worried about, is losing 1,000 homes in a day, and that can happen and has happened.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was born and raised in California, and obviously wildfires are huge out there, and I've several times. When I was a kid, we lived in houses that sort of backed up to grassland, and 2 or 3 times, different times, we had wildfires right on the other side of our backyard fence, flames like 20 feet tall. And luckily, we've never had a house burn down in that, but man, it's scary. It's real scary to be that close to 20, 30 foot tall flames.
Yeah. Like you said, it's back to our lizard brain stuff. Fire bad. It will burn and kill me, and if it doesn't burn and kill me, it'll take all my oxygen, and that'll do it too. So we know that fire is really it's a scary thing to us. But here's where it gets more nebulous, right? We need it. It's an important part of the environment. And we know that if we suppress every fire, put them all out, and that was a policy in this country for many, many, many years. And we, and we said Smokey Bear is probably second only to Santa Claus in most people in this country, at least as far as recognizable characters. And me and Smokey are friends. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to go on a diatribe about Smokey. We're buddies. Smokey, however, in that kind of fast policy of 1A, only we can do anything about fire, and we're only ones who are responsible for unplanned ignitions, sort of takes out of the picture the role that fire plays in the ecosystem, the importance it has to creating a mosaic landscape, to having different types of habitats, and to managing fuels, which is normally what we would see on the landscape, isn't little fire here, big fire there, little fire here, and so when they got going, we couldn't have something like East Troublesome burning 120,000 acres in a 12-hour period, which had never happened before. And I try getting your head. I've been a professional wildland firefighter and manager for almost 20 years now, and visualizing an acre on the ground is a tough thing to do. And visualizing 250,000 of them on the landscape is really, really challenging. So here's a situation for people who know Eagle County, at least. If we started the East Troublesome fire in Dot Cerro, it would be to Copper Mountain by the following morning, having pretty much burned through the entirety of Eagle County. That was 50 miles from here. And we talked about the Marshall Fire, which burned 1,000 homes in a day in December while it was dumping snow up here. But so, we talked about Lahaina, which is in Hawaii, right? So wildland fire disasters can occur anywhere where that situation where built fuels and vegetative fuels align with topography and weather. In fact, those are the three sides of the fire triangle: is fuels, topography, weather, fire behavior triangle.
Okay.
So we can't really do much about the weather. We can't move the mountain necessarily, but we can decide where we locate development, and we can prepare the fuels. And if we recognize our home is nothing but fuel, then we can begin to take mitigative actions to address that. Just like most people would recognize a pine tree burns better than a deciduous tree. Well, an asphalt composite roof is less ignitable than a wood shake roof.
Right.
Wood siding is going to ignite more readily than cement fiberboard or stucco or things like that. And then there's this other kind of common misconception that, well, in order to, prepare my property and my home for fire, it's going to cost me more. It's going to cost me a lot more to build my home this way. And that's not at all accurate. It might cost you more after the fact to make retrofits, but, there's been all kinds of studies done showing the return on investment for mitigation somewhere, around 500 to 200 to 1, depending on what study you look at. But I think it's a pretty good ROI on anything if you could get that back. So it's just a tough thing because, like you said, you backed up against the grasslands and the chaparral and the fire-dependent ecosystems of California, and nothing happened over 20 years, and that might be the case until it happens. That's what I always tell people. Is that I don't know where the next wildfire in Eagle County will be or when, but I do know it will happen, and I do know there'll be some areas that'll do better than others.
Yeah, well, and that's a really scary thing. Let's bring it back locally here in Eagle County. I've thought for years, like, what if like Vail Mountain or Beaver Creek caught on fire? What is there an action plan for that? Because obviously now we're not just talking fire and loss of property, but now we're talking about the ski resort and with the devastation that could bring. So what does Vail Mountain or Beaver Creek, what kind of action plans do they have in place if there was a fire?
Yeah, so first of all, they do have them.
Okay.
We'll start west and work our way. So Beaver Creek, right? We also have. In addition, we have all of the sort of notification systems that we all should be aware of, down to signing up for EC Alert, into the iPause system, which is like the Amber Alert deal, where we blow up everybody's phone in a geographic area,
right,
down to deputies on blowhorns, and in Avon and Wildridge in that area they have sirens, which is good. And that was a problem in Lahaina because they have sirens for tsunamis and hurricanes, not for wildfires. So the idea there is the siren goes off, you run to the hills. Not a good idea if it's all on fire. So the sirens in that area are actually for wildfire, and so there's some public information kind of things there. But Beaver Creek and Vail, for that matter, both have detailed plans about how they will bring staff and guests off the mountain, how they will shut things down. Beaver Creek keeps some snowmaking equipment charged so that there could potentially be additional water up there.
Oh, yeah, like the snow guns, they could spray water.
Yeah, there are ponds and areas like that could be dipped into. There could potentially be, that water can be made available for firefighting as well. That's one thing that Beaver Creek has looked at. Both resorts do a lot of mowing of roadways and communications and action plans for their employees. And as far as guests, the general plan is to bring people down off the gondola when they can, or to get, before they'll do anything they can to get everybody off the mountain. And so I'm only have I haven't developed these plans, but I know that they exist.
Okay.
So the idea then would be, in all the ways we can, even to just kind of like basic ski patrol, sweep the mountain for hikers kind of stuff is into the plan.
Right.
Those ski areas are pretty good at containing and moving people, even in summer. It's sort of what they do.
Right.
The bigger concern is what do we do with all those short-term rentals and all those folks that are, if you check into the Hyatt or the Hyatt in Baylor Beaver Creek, right, you're working with a whole staff of people that are connected at different levels to the appropriate people in Eagle County. If you show up at Airbnb in Wild Ridge, at the top of Wild Ridge, and you don't have any kind of connections to EC Alert or anything like that, or where you're going or how you're going to communicate, that becomes an even bigger issue. So that's something that Vail, for example, has been working on, is what to do with short-term rentals, how to get people that information, what to do about those property owners who bought that property as a short-term rental investment and don't really have the investment in the things we've been previously talking about.
Right.
And that's true of second homeowners, is not necessarily across the board, but keeping out of county ownership of these properties in the WUI, invested in preparing for wildfire, and then keeping the tenants or guests of those properties aware of the current situation. It's a moving target.
Yeah.
A tricky challenge.
I mean, emergency response is always a tricky animal, right?
Yeah, and so I guess I'm lucky that I'm in the mitigation shop, in that we just sort of accept that it's going to happen. We don't know what level. We don't care. We're going to prepare for it with the stuff we know works. And the more that we can implement mitigation strategies on a parcel, community, and landscape level, the more better we are prepared for the return of that environment. And that's where we steal that term fire adaptation or fire adapted communities from the natural world. Like you talked about beetle kill and lodgepole pines. Well, a lodgepole pine doesn't open up its cone and release seed as what's called serotinous cones that won't let that seed go until they know that the conditions are right for it to grow. So that happens with heat, whether it's from a fire or just from the fact that the canopy opened up and the cone's laid on the ground in the sun. And it's like
interesting.
aspen, like full sun, and not a lot of competition from shade producing trees like conifers. So they are colonizers and they grow like strawberries, right? They clone themselves and push out across the landscape. And that's their strategy over time to be primary successors and come into a fire area. Ponderosa pines can lose 3/4 of their canopy and have really thick bark. Same with Douglas fir that insulate them from low intensity fire. It's like the Front Range of Colorado and all that ponderosa pine. That's the fire suppression over 100 years. You have a forest community that would see small little surface fires come through every 10 years or so and burn out all that understory brush and small regenerating trees. And that's the adaptation a ponderosa pine has with that thick bark and ability to lose part of its canopy. And then we put out all those fires for 100 years and we create an epidemic of trees. And I drive through the Front Range and I look at all those ponderosas in their completely unnatural state, and I start thinking about, this fire could do 200 homes in an hour, or this one I'll call this, or here, so we have climate change, we have forest ecosystems that are outside of their fire regime, we have, droughts that come and go, and then we have topographical constraints like mountains and rivers, and 80% of Eagle County is managed by the BLM or U.S. Forest Service, right? Public ownership. So there's limits on what we can do there. In some places like Vail, we have wilderness boundaries that are in people's backyards. So what I do and what all of my partners in the world of mitigation do is kind of work through these barriers and challenges and just sort of do what we know will lessen the impacts of the fire. And we never get to zero risk, and we never take fire off the table, because that creates bigger problems down the road. Right?
Well, I mean, and I think this is probably common knowledge, but we do want some fire, right? It helps the forest.
We go out and we set them. We prescribe fire. It's a beauty of the management and, I guess, semantics around fire over the years with the forest. There's only two types of fires as far as the Forest Service is concerned. They're planned and unplanned.
Okay, right.
So, and that planned ones mean that, we recognize the ecological and resource value of using fire as a tool, whether it's manage fuels in and around our communities to prevent, catastrophic fire from destroying our homes and watersheds and infrastructure, or whether we use it to, accelerate natural processes and improve wildlife habitat. We do a lot of burning aimed strictly at improving winter range for mule deer and elk, and others that are aimed at, creating more forage. We spent a lot of time. We did a prescribed fire in the Brush Creek Valley this spring where, amazing effort was taken to protect one tree with one raptor in it. So but all of that, and then you see the work that's done mechanically with machines, kind of chewing up brush and creating mosaic landscapes on the landscape, or there's a lot of different tools, but all aimed at kind of preventing catastrophic damage from the potential for those really large fires like Cameron Peak or East Troublesome or Marshall or some of the ones we've talked about today.
Yeah. So, when I drive around through the mountains here and you see the beetle kill, and over in Grand County especially, and in Summit County,
Mm-hmm.
you see entire hillsides that are dead, basically beetle kill. And in my mind, I drive around and I just think to myself, man, if that ever catches fire, what's going to happen? But what goes through your mind when you see those entire hillsides of beetle
I think,
kill?
boy, I wish some of that would catch fire so we could get. But I know that it's a problem. Like, I wish our communities were more, adapted so that we could have natural ignitions and what we could use fire to do its natural thing. I see beetle kill damage, whether it's to lodgepole pine or to spruce or to Douglas fir or to pinions, which is tend to be the bark beetles that are the most aggressive around here. And I think, yeah, that's a problem, but it's more of like an indicator of an overall forest health issue or a process that's happening related to the natural communities around us kind of need change,
right.
And they need it. And if we have an area where an insect is really able to get in and do some damage in the long term life cycle of that forest, it's kind of just doing its natural thing. And
right.
It's just happening. It's bumping up against our kind of intrinsic values related to the view. We tend to show up and look at a landscape and say that's it. That's the natural state of that landscape, and any change to it kind of triggers human value-based beliefs around, well, it doesn't look the same as it did once, or now it's gone, it all burned up, and it doesn't matter to me that needed to happen, and there's a whole new community taking root there. Or we're concerned about the impacts to our health and to our property. So I look at forest insects, and particularly when you go to parts like Grand County where it was hit by mountain pine bark beetle, or you can go down to Wolf Creek Pass and see 90% mortality in the spruce and fir. It's sad to me as a human, but it's kind of business as usual for the forest.
Right.
It sets up it's just all, again, more fuel loading. I sometimes get more concerned when I drive around communities that are just buried in an ocean of Gamble oak, and it's that continuous fuel for miles and miles and miles. And I think about fires like Lake Christine or Storm King or Panorama, or think about like what can happen in wind and grasses and brush when it has a heavy wind on it, and how quickly that fire can move, and then it can be really hard for people to get away from. I think I look at communities. I drive around some of these like communities that were built without any eye to fire, that have one road in and one road out, and that are tightly packed and have wood roofs or abundance of landscaping that may have been forced on those owners by an HOA. I look at those communities as a much bigger concern to me than a dead hillside of pinyon pine or spruce.
Right.
Not that there aren't all concerns, but you also have to decide, again, what is the level of risk that I'm comfortable living with. We never get to zero, but we don't want to just walk around with heads in the sand. So, and that point might be different for all of us.
So that kind of brings me up to another little quick video I was going to show you here. Let's watch this.
Let's talk about trees and fire mitigation. These are lodgepole pines that I have on the side of my property, and you'll notice there are no low-lying branches. But, however, you will see there's a bunch of dead pine needles and twigs and old wood and such. So if a fire comes up this direction, it has a ton of fuel on the ground. But then I have raked up pine needles around the property, and it's just dirt and rocks. So there's no fuel for that fire to go any further. The only place it can go is up the tree. But since there are no low-lying branches, it really has nowhere else to go. Trees are really resilient, especially trunks. So the fire may burn the outside of this tree, but that will protect it and keep it alive. And since there are no low-lying branches, there's no place for that fire to continue to go.
That was a good one.
You like that one?
That one, she nailed it. She kind of had an understanding of the fact that there are trees here, but the burning canopy of a lodgepole pine tree that's 40 feet in the air is not the threat. It's all of those needles and branches and stuff that's collecting on the forest floor. That fuel will bring fire continuously across the surface. And if there were low branches on a tree, it would begin to climb up those, or we call that a ladder, fire ladder or ladder fuel. And, if there was no separation between all of those pine needles and cones as it moved towards the little landing of her deck there, that's the issue. I can show you all kinds of pictures and videos and stuff where the trees are all perfectly intact around a smoldering foundation.
Wow.
And that was because the home was lost to other factors, probably embers, usually landing in and around those exterior walls, or being sucked into vents, or starting fires in roof valleys or gutters, or in firewood piles on decks, or being blown into the garage where everybody keeps all the stuff that they know will burn. Those are usually the ignition sources more than the trees around the house. So defensible space is necessary, but home hardening and management of your personal property, and it's kind of like fire mitigation, is a lifestyle choice. Some stuff you get to do once, like cut down a tree, and that's the fun and sexy stuff.
Right.
Other stuff you have to do every single day, every year, like clean your gutters, clearing your dryer vents, rake stuff away from exterior walls, mow the grass within 30 feet. Those are the sort of annual stuff, and unfortunately, getting out the chainsaw and doing that kind of thing doesn't. You
don't get to do that. That's the fun part.
That is the fun part. We were talking about my family lake place in Idaho, which is in a ponderosa pine forest, and it rains pine needles all year round, and so that's basically what it is. And when I can't do it, we pay to have it done, and they just yearly huge slash pile of pine needles and pine needles only down to be burned and pulled away from the house.
That's amazing. All right, we got one more video. Let's watch this other video and then we'll talk about it.
There's 3 things you should have in your house that you probably don't. The first is an escape ladder upstairs. Then a carbon monoxide alarm installed outside your bedroom. And finally, a fire extinguisher on every floor, but especially near your kitchen.
Well, I wouldn't disagree with any of those things, but I think we stepped outside of the wildfire mitigation world and into the home fire safety world. But what I would say, the 3 things you need to have in the context of wildfire is, 1, how do I get out of this neighborhood? So rather than my window ladder, what is my escape route from this community?
Okay.
You and I are sitting in a community today that only has one way in and out. So you and me and all of our friends and neighbors are all scrambling for that same point. So how quickly do I want to get myself ready and out of that
right.
So that's like the window ladder equivalent of that. What is my egress? And if I can't get out, do I have a safety zone or someplace I could? I think about that. We got a big irrigated soccer field over there, right behind your house here. That maybe you might not want to stay in there forever, but if I was I might be safer in my vehicle in a place like that than I would be driving, stuck in traffic in a wooded area where the fire could overtake me. So giving some thought to evacuation. How will I be notified? Where will I go? And how will I get there? That'd be the one thing that everybody needs to do. What was the other one she had? Carbon monoxide detector. Yeah, you got to have those because that's a silent kill. That's like stuff that you can really freak out about if you know about it.
Yeah.
So that monoxide detector or fire smoke alarm detector is the equivalent of notifications. Have I signed up for EC Alert? That's a subscription-based thing. You got to sign up for that. On down to, like I said, you'll get that iPause, that Amber Alert style warning. You might even have a deputy going up and down the street with a blowhorn or knocking on your door. But those are that's pretty late in the game.
Right.
That's like you notice carbon monoxide in your house because the dog was already dead.
Right.
The third one was fire extinguisher. So that's the defensible space and home hardening piece, right? We've extinguished the fire before it got there. We went and we pulled trees away from the house. We created a defensible space so that we knocked the steam out of that fire. We weren't just in the middle of the woods. We started to pull it out, take down some of the heat forces, remove the opportunity for direct flame contact with the house. And then we moved in even closer. We looked at what was touching the wall in that first 5 feet. We created a fire-free 5 by removing woody shrubs and combustible vegetation, got rid of wood piles, switched out wood mulch for gravels, got rid of anything that might directly create a fire touching the exterior of my house. So that would be the 3 things that everybody needs: a hardened home, defensible space, and a good solid notification and evacuation plan.
Yeah. No, actually, I love how you took that video and related it more to the wildfire. That was cool.
But you should definitely have a carbon monoxide detector, a smoke alarm, and I don't know that I have a window ladder, but that would be a good thing too. Maybe I'll go to Home Depot.
Maybe today is gonna.
I looked out my window in my bedroom and thought, well, it's about 12, 15 feet down there. I will survive this fall.
Right. I exactly. I've been in a lot of homes from doing inspections, and some of them are like 3 stories tall.
Yeah.
And you think to yourself, if there's a fire, someone's going to jump out this window, and you just sort of think, well, it's one evil versus another evil, right?
Well, if you live in a basement apartment and you planted a bunch of vegetation around your window well, which is your exit from the basement should the house be burning on top of you, and it's created a fire hazard too. So you and I probably see stuff day in and day out that seems little and isn't an issue until it is. I planted a juniper hedge in front of my window from my basement room. Now I can't get out in the structure fire, and I've created an issue that might ignite my home during a wildfire.
Yeah. Yeah.
They need to talk to people like you and me more.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. That's why we're doing this podcast.
That's right. I'm
You know,
sure we're getting to that part.
We're trying to educate people and just kind of bring this stuff to awareness, right? I've got just a couple more things I want to ask you about. So, defensible space around the home. What can a homeowner do? Just what are some practical steps they can do on their own, which I know we've touched on, but maybe just sort of spell them out real quick. And then what resources does Eagle County have, whatnot, that a homeowner can use?
Yeah. The first thing they can do is realize, if they haven't by now, that everybody needs to do this. You need to take a look. And then the resources that are available to her is me, my staff, the fire district staff, where you're at, any number of people, home inspectors, fire professionals and landscape forestry professionals. There's a lot of people that can start. So it's just realizing that I need to think about this, call somebody or look into it to help me then rule it out, because nobody in Louisville or Superior thought that was going to happen there either. Then, those resources that are available to them through the Real Fire program, which is realfire.net, or through Eagle Valley Wildland if you're in the I-70 corridor, or through Vale Fire if you're in Vale, or through the Roaring Fork Valley Wildfire Collaborative on the Roaring Fork side, we can put you in touch with all of those resources. The things people need to do, there's all different kinds of homeowners, or home occupiers would be a better way, because we tend to have these conversations centered around the idea that you own this home and surrounding area and you can impact all of that. There's plenty of folks who rent their homes, or like we talked about short-term rentals too. So any home occupier can take a look at things like, is there a big firewood pile stacked on my deck in the middle of the summer? What do the gutters look like in this house? Can I clean those gutters? Can I move the firewood? Can I not store my stuff under the deck like old winter tires or all this or anything like that? You can start looking at the home and immediate surrounding area and doing maintenance.
Okay.
Cutting low grasses, moving twigs and flammable debris away from walls, screening vents, cleaning lint out of vents, cleaning gutters, moving firewood piles, all that kind of stuff is, into the maintenance, and anybody can do this stuff. The harder things, and that's where you want somebody that, can tell you whether it's warranted to replace a roof or enclose a deck or flash. There's some other more labor intensive home hardening stuff that might involve a building permit and might need a little more professional assistance that, a home inspection or fire professional can guide you on. The next thing they want to do, and this might not be available to anybody, if I'm in a mobile home park and I live in, that's it, right? Or if I'm in a townhome complex, I can look at party wall to party wall. So then you might say, hey, maintenance people or property management people, you need to help me with this kind of stuff. We need to keep grasses down. We need to keep, we need to look not at just homes but fences. We need to talk about what are our primary and secondary evacuation routes. We need to communicate that to people in a language that they understand. We need to not just metaphorically without the acronyms and fire speak, but maybe it's in English, maybe it's in Spanish, maybe it's in another one entirely. So we kind of try to meet people with where they're at and kind of look at that relationship between the home, what's immediately touching the home, what's in the first 30 feet, and then what's kind of the bigger picture around it. And then kind of starting at the home and working out. Right. I have a lot of people that want to do that. They're fine with cutting down that dead tree that's 100 feet away from their house, but they won't touch the Prince Albert spruce or juniper hedges that are touching their deck or wall that are like literally gasoline on a stick.
Right.
Because they've become very attached to the landscaping, and they think that, and I also, when we talk about defensible space and landscaping and removing shrubs and trees and stuff, it doesn't have to be a barren area. Like, we're not talking about a 5-foot area around the house that excludes any kind of vegetation and it is all rock and concrete. That works, but we can also do things within that. We can use, vegetative ground cover. We can use like a xeriscape kind of a situation where and fire adapted, and plants that have low ignition potential, use less water, are going to create a curb appeal, if you will,
right, without
lending themselves to a home ignition or fire hazard scenario.
Yeah. Okay, so homeowners can get in touch. Will somebody from Eagle County come out?
Yeah, somebody from Eagle County or the fire district or whomever. A good point to start in Eagle County is either contacting my department directly through me or our mitigation specialist, Katie Jenkins. They can do that by coming to the Eagle County website or going to realfire.net. You would probably either get her or I or somebody from the fire district to come out and work with you. On the Roaring Fork side, we have a cadre of people as well. somebody will come out, look at your property, its specific risk, and make recommendations specific to that property.
Right.
Which sometimes are as little as, hey, I think you should move this firewood pile and cut the grass more, to, no, you gotta re-roof this sucker.
So let's say somebody lives and they're kind of in a foresty area, and there is a lot of these pine needles and fuel and things like that around. Who do they call to come clean that stuff up?
Yeah, well, there's a whole bunch of contractors out there, and we do provide a list of folks that we know are at least capable and insured, because you don't want to put somebody on the property with a chainsaw and a wood chipper unless they're insured. So for liability and compensation, right? So I would say anybody, before you hire somebody to come work on your property, just those are my only base requirements, just to make sure that nobody gets hurt or sued when they do this work. You can call during the summer months. Hopefully by next year, just about every part of Eagle County, we will be offering curbside shipping again. This year went
that was great this year.
I think everybody liked that. That went really well. It's a service that I think people appreciate and need. A lot of times the barriers to doing mitigation work, time and money, and it costs money. It takes time to cut down trees and haul them to the dump. So that's an effort to try to make that happen. And we're hoping to be more countywide, including the Roaring Fork Valley. Again, we've got great organization over there as well, and we are working towards providing that shipping service on that side as well. We offer cost share assistance pretty much, I think, at this point in all three counties, Eagle, Garfield, and Pitkin, that are part of the Eagle County or Roaring Fork Collaborative, so that we can provide you, at least in Eagle County, for individual properties up to $1,000 in assistance and a reimbursement for any of these actions we've talked about, so your home and surrounding area. And then on a community level, up to $7,500. And that looks like we talked about those, we do have a lot of condos and townhomes and communal ownership of the surrounding area. So we'll work with that property management and HOA to do the trees and shrubs and grass piece that otherwise those tenants don't have much control over, because they only rent or own party wall to party wall.
Right. So last thing I want to touch on with you, Eric, is you mentioned the Real Fire program, and I do have our last video of the day.
It better be a good one.
Well, it's your Real Fire one, so let's take a look at it real quick, and then we'll talk about it.
My thoughts are on this one.
We decided to do this. It benefits us and benefits the town. We don't need things burning down around here. We heard about the program, I believe, the first time we heard about it was at our annual meeting. It was brought up by one of the members and was greatly talked about at the association meeting.
The work that I did was I cleared all the vegetation. It was, overgrown like around town, and laid down the fabric and then we had 4 or 5 inches of gravel brought in, and I took all summer putting that down. So
the thing that surprised me the most about this program is that there's financial assistance to help you with your costs and so on, and it's a fantastic thing to hopefully get people to participate.
if someone was thinking about whether they wanted to or not, I'd say go ahead and do it, because you've been a great help in telling us what to do. You do not tell people, you're not going to clear cut everything. You don't tell them what to do. You give suggestions on what to do. And it's a benefit, to people, not only for peace of mind, but for also insurance benefits. And I'd say go for it.
I just wanted to bring the back in for a second so people could see the website. So tell me about the Real Fire program. Is this a unique thing to Eagle County? Tell me about the program.
Yeah, so Real Fire was a partnership that we entered into with the Vail Board of Realtors and the Community Wildfire Planning Center in 2016. It is not unique to Eagle County. In fact, we worked closely with Boulder County Wildfire Partners to develop this program. Wildfire Partners is addressing all of Boulder County, something like 40 fire districts and millions of people. So it wasn't. We designed Real Fire to be more at scale for a mountain resort community. We work closely with partners as well as a number of local insurance providers to develop a voluntary program that was aimed at, like the Bodley said there, identifying what are the specific risks to this property.
We just lost one of our lights, people.
Oh, now it's spooky time. Again, we worked with the insurance company originally, insurance industry, and specifically the research done by Jack Cohen and Steve Quarles, the Insurance Institute for Home and Business Safety, to say, well, what is these concerns around parcel level wildfire risk for the insurance industry? And we pointed back to that science done by Jack and Steve, and work with, modeled after the Partners program to say, okay, well, we can identify 40 different attributes of the home and surrounding area that are most likely going to lend themselves to ignition, assess those in the field on each property, and provide mitigation actions related to those potential ignition hazards. Then we also talk about a lot of that, have you ever evacuated your home? Where are you going to go? What's your insurance policy? Does it cover total loss of the structure and replacement of
Be
all
prepared,
of the property that's in there?
basically.
So we do a little bit of preparedness for the owners as well as the property. And I think that was the question. What is real fire, right?
Yeah. No, it sounds like a great program.
It is. It's a voluntary program in nature, and the Bodleys there, by the way, are the only year-round residents of Fulford. So they're kind of. You see, Fulford obviously is a community that needs some level of, resiliency, being as isolated as it is. But we talked about that fire-free 5 feet and how we gave them $1,000 to go ahead and do that. It probably costs a little more than that. It is a cost-share program, not a we pay for it all program. But if we're going back to that number that I always hover around in my head, which was from a study done by the Community Wildfire Planning Center after the Waldo fire in Colorado Springs, which estimated a return of investment on that mitigation work of around 500-1. Wow. And that kind of almost checks out, or used to, real estate values being what they are right now.
Yeah.
But if I, throw $1,000 to do a fire-free 5-foot gravel and landscaping project around, a $500,000 home, that's kind of that's what we're talking about here. These are low dollar actions that have big payback.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the hesitation for people is that they're spending time and money to do work for something that may not ever happen. And that's the challenge for all of us. And when we justify our existence and what we do in the world of mitigation and prevention and protection, it's like, well, we can't claim that we didn't have any wildfires this year because of our work. But I know that if we had and the fires that we did have, and we always do, we were able to, adequately suppress as necessary because of all the great coordination and partnership and work we do on the safe and effective response side. I know that our communities will be much more prepared because of all the, hundreds of homes we've looked at and millions of dollars we've spent, and people have matched with their own dollars to do the work. And I think that on the landscape level, as you drive around this valley and you see our fuel breaks going in, and you see our thinning projects, and when we look to bigger things like maybe selective timber harvesting on the forest, that if the big monster like East Troublesome shows up, the kind of fire that can engulf the county in a couple of days, and I remember that can happen, and it did happen, that I think will fare better. When I look across the state, I look at this summer's fires on the Front Range, and even though homes were lost and acres burned, I think that it was a totally different environment than in 2020 and 2018 when we were seeing hundreds of thousands of acres burned and thousands of homes lost.
Yeah.
The fact that we were counting the acres or the homes burned by the tens rather than the hundreds or thousands, I think shows the needle beginning to move in Colorado in the West on fire.
Yeah.
Hopefully I can wrap this up with some kind of positive note there.
Yeah, well, and I was going to say, basically what I'm hearing from you is fires are going to happen.
Definitely.
You can't prevent them 100%. But what we really need to do is just protect ourselves, protect our homes, do the little things that we can do to help prevent a devastation in case of a fire.
Yeah, I think that's well put.
Awesome. Well, this has been awesome, Eric. It's not every day that we get to talk about this subject. And that's really the whole goal of this podcast, is to try to have some topics and things that aren't your typical, because this is the real estate podcast, but we were talking fire, right? But we were also relating it to homes and defensible space and things like that. So, I hope anyone who's been listening to this is going to get some great action tips, maybe some great things to think about if they haven't already, and, just having a better overall awareness of what people need to do to help protect themselves and their property.
And at the end of the day, if I can do that, then, I've earned my salary for the day.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, guys, Eric Lovgren from Eagle County Wildfire Prevention Department. Is that what it's called?
Close enough. Let's call it Wildfire Mitigation Department. Yeah.
Wildfire Mitigation. Okay, great.
They added that protection to me last year. I'm still getting my head around it.
if you guys need anything, but really, I do want to urge you guys to, if you have property, to make sure you do have some defensible space around that property, and just do whatever you can. We can't prevent it 100%, but let's do it all what we can. And Eric, this has been a great episode, super informative. Appreciate it. Thank you for
My
coming
pleasure.
into
Yeah.
the studio, and we're going to go ahead and wrap it up, people.
Rocky Mountain High, Rocky Mountain High.
Boom.